We have a great treat for you guys today. We're speaking to Faryn Pearl and Kelly Cooney, who are the director and producer of the new film Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken. It opens this week at theaters everywhere. They are so generous and interesting and funny. You're going to fall in love with them, and we want everyone going out and supporting this film this week. It is about girl power and teenage girls, moms, grandmas, everything that we can all relate to. We hope you enjoy. Good, well,
How are
thanks, you
you?
guys.
Hi.
Morning.
You've been on a whirlwind. Are you? You're just back from France, right?
Yes, that's right. We had our world premiere at the Annecy Film Festival, which was super
That's
exciting.
amazing. That is so. I said, why didn't we get into the world where our annual convention is in France every year?
I'm seriously, it was the first time either of us had ever been, and
No,
Oh,
really?
yeah.
it
To
felt
Annecy?
like, yeah,
Really? Oh,
yeah.
and as you said, it's like a convention that just happens to take place in the most beautiful place on
Right,
earth.
know.
It's not
right. You
bad.
need to talk to Miss Courtney Pulaski and tell her to get you on that regular schedule because every year I'm so Courtney and I've been friends forever. Our
Oh,
kids went
wow.
to school
Wow.
together, and yeah, we've been friends forever. But every year she would tell me, "Oh, I'm going to be in Annecy. I'm going to be in France." I'm like, "What? What? How am I not in this world?"
I know.
That is amazing. So congratulations on the
Thank
premiere.
you.
That's exciting.
Thank
And it's
you.
so nice to meet you ladies. I'm surprised we have not actually met before. I did DreamWorks Animation PR for about 8 years as one of your external agencies. I ran it
Amazing.
with Ann Globe and Shannon Olivas and that team before, like years ago.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
yeah.
What films
So
did you
yeah,
work on?
I did. So I wasn't like the PR firm that did all the movie. I did more of the corporate stuff. So,
Got it.
but we did a lot with like Rise of the Guardians and Shrek, and we did the Kung Fu Panda, How to Train Your Dragon launch, things like that. So we were really working with a lot of probably your peers and so forth on like the ornithologist and like bringing them in and doing stories around that and
Oh
the
yeah.
creative process. So we were doing more of that kind of creative storytelling with the team versus the publicity around the actual films themselves from a consumer perspective.
Oh, that's so
And
cool.
Renee's being very humble. She also did a lot with Jeffrey on all of the
Yeah, like
technology
the
and him,
HP Intel
yeah, and
Oh
launch.
wow,
him,
yeah, that's
yeah,
Yeah.
shift from that not just, but from running a
Yeah.
studio to the technology and Billy really being known. So she did a lot of
So
that work with him directly.
so I worked with like Kate
Amazing.
Swanborg for years, and I knew your whole team, so I'm like shocked. Like when your name, I was like, how do I not know these ladies? Like this is crazy because you guys have worked on so many incredible like of the
Yeah.
productions that have come out of DreamWorks.
Yeah, Kate and I did a fireside chat about the technology of Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken at Annecy.
Oh, you
Oh,
So,
did?
that's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah, it was fun.
incredible.
Is that is that a world? Do you guys find yourself really meshing that world of science and art? I mean, it's such a. I mean, animation has really become where, like you said, technology and science and the kind of the traditional artistic world of making movies and drawing. That's so. It's the place where it really meets.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's pretty mind blowing the amount of talent that we have at DreamWorks, sort of across the board. You know, for Farron and myself, we really focus more on the storytelling, and luckily we have
Yeah.
brilliant people that work with us that understand the technology, so that when we ask a question like, "How could we, create a giant mermaid with thousands of pounds of water hair?" they can find some way to figure out how to do it, and just tell us, what not to do that will make it more difficult for
that's
them.
right. Yeah, no, the science and math, I mean, that's the magic in CG
Yeah.
animation, I think. When I was on the other side and I didn't work in CG animation, I was always just kind of wowed by what you could create out of nothing, because everything, we don't have a set or anything, it's just all from the computers. And yeah, I'm growing more and more aware of how much work and algorithms and strategy has to go into something like, I'm looking at the poster behind Kelly, these streams of light that are coming out
Yeah.
from behind Ruby. And I feel very lucky, as Kelly said, that there are people who know how to do it, who aren't me
That,
particularly, but
I
it's really,
remember
really magic.
when Prince of Egypt came out and the water scene in Prince of Egypt
Yeah.
I mean, I'm dating myself probably. I was a film buyer for, I was a head film buyer at AMC and at ArcLight for years. So every movie coming out we saw. But the water scenes in Prince of Egypt were groundbreaking. I mean, it was like the
Yeah.
first time where you were looking at that and you didn't know if you were looking at animation or real filmed water. It's just everything, all of that evolution has been amazing. And I don't think we think about the technology enough or the scientists behind that.
Yeah.
And you guys have, well, we have another touch of that wave, 6 degrees of separation. So I don't know if Courtney told you, but the She-Ra team was at our summit 3 years ago. Was it pre-COVID?
Pre-COVID.
Yeah, it was pre-COVID. But the entire team, we have pictures of Renee and I with
Oh,
the
wow.
with the helmets on, and we had a blast with those. I call them girls because they were all so young and wonderful. But those
Yeah.
were our audience, because we get a lot of students and we get a
Yeah.
lot of people, starting their careers. But it was like being at a concert. They were like gaga over all the voice actresses and the creators and the director and the writer and of She-Ra being at our summit. So it was a lot of fun for our audience.
Oh, I mean, I was on She-Ra for the briefest of moments, and I feel so lucky that I was, because in a way, like it's a production that I think I want to see more of in terms of the themes it was working with and also the people on it. But it was really even when I was working at DreamWorks TV at the time, and that's why I worked a little bit on She-Ra. But it was such a diverse crew, and actually majority female, which I thought was really. I mean, we could talk about more, but like that was kind of groundbreaking for me as someone who's worked in animation. I'm only starting to see more women in the creative side of it,
Yeah.
which is really, I mean, what I want to see more of. That's how we get more tales, and that's how we get more shows like She-Ra or, Ruby Gillman.
Yeah, yeah.
It was interesting. I remember we had a meeting. I forget who it was. It was somebody over at Disney. But we
the
were talking
animation,
about
women in animation.
women in animation, and they were talking about just what the cycle is, because animation takes so much longer, that for the new chapter of talent to come through it, because each film is 2 or 3 years, that animation is so far behind in terms of some of the DE&I efforts and so forth, just because of how long it takes to create some of these incredible projects.
Yeah, and it's
I think that's a really good point. I was going to say because I've been at DreamWorks for a little over 2 decades now, and when I first joined, our entire story team was all men. And it very much was like, production staff was female and artists were men. And I've watched that change, and even just like on our crew, I have to say this is probably one of the first times that we had pretty much 50-50, at least in story. And then, obviously that fluctuated. There were times that we, might have had more men than women, or at one point I think we had more women than men. But it is one of the things that I think Faryn and I both are super proud of, is how many women we had in leadership positions on the film.
No, that's amazing. So tell us about Ruby. This is so exciting. I loved reading about how you both are storytellers, and that's where you got your start, and you wanted to be storytellers. So tell us how it came into that you became storytellers through animation, and then this amazing teenage girl story that we get to enjoy this week.
So I'll start. Growing up, I was the youngest of 5, and we lived out in the country, and so I had to make up my own games to play with myself. So I had a very active imagination, and I always loved storytelling and loved movies also. I was a child of the 80s, and every weekend my mom would take us to the store so we could rent VHS tapes and rent our 3 or 4 movies for the weekend, because she also had 5 kids that she needed to keep occupied. So, I really loved movies and I loved storytelling. And when I moved to Los Angeles, it was really just to work in the film industry, as a whole. It wasn't that I was necessarily looking for animation. But I was really fortunate that one of my, really my first job out of college was working as a production assistant at DreamWorks. And I just fell in love with the process of it. I love the way we iterate on stories, the way it's super collaborative, like the best idea wins and it could come from anywhere. And so it was really the thing that I fell in love with was the process and also just watching how an idea on a piece of paper, as Faryn mentioned, like it can be created, like whatever you can imagine, we can find some way to create it. And watching how that all evolved and developed from, you know, a sketch on a piece of paper or a painting to then the final frame of the movie, I'm still fascinated by watching that process. And so I just felt really fortunate to land at DreamWorks and to be part of some really amazing filmmaking teams, from the Shrek movies to the Trolls movies, because I also felt like tonally I loved sort of the irreverent, subversive sense of humor of those movies, but I also loved that they all were really grounded in an emotional story and had relationships that you could relate to. And so when it came time to produce a movie myself, I was really excited to work on Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken, just because, you know, to be able to sort of subvert your expectations about what you expect from a hero, or what you expect, you know, you don't expect the mermaid to be the villain. And so to be able to sort of play in that space felt like a sort of extension of so much of what I'd already been learning how to do from working at DreamWorks all those years.
What was that first project you got to work on there?
Shrek 2.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like I
Yeah.
landed in the really great place, because yeah, the Shrek movies were just so fun, and it was really an exciting time to be at the studio because we were in that transition from 2D to CG, and just watching that evolution, and then also just that group of filmmakers, the way it was very story driven, like storyboard artists did a lot of writing and coming up with, you know, sequences and jokes, and I just loved that process.
Well, and Shrek is really credited with taking animation out of that family only, kids only world. I mean, I know there were other things and little bits and pieces, but as far as making it, just it's really credited with changing and broadening the entire animation world. So it was
Yeah,
that was a big time to be there.
yeah, yeah. It was cool.
And what about you, Farron? How did animation become your storytelling outlet?
Oh yeah, I mean, I feel like I have a pretty common story, which is I always loved animation and art and cartooning, really. But I grew up in New Jersey, and anything about entertainment felt very far away, felt very intangible. It wasn't even a thought in my mind that that was somewhere I could go. So I was a real like academic student. I at one point wanted to be a professor. I wanted to, you know, or a journalist or something, and I kept getting drawn back to, you know, animation, and like I used to draw, and I still do, draw comics about myself, my life. It's just the outlet, and I would study Mad Magazine and Sunday morning comics, like Kathy was a favorite. And that was
I
all.
never even thought about
I
Kathy.
know. I was like, "You're Caroline in the City." Do you guys remember Caroline in the City? I'm thinking,
Oh, yeah.
Karen's
Oh,
Caroline in the City.
yeah. Oh, no, I love all of them, and I do really like Kathy outside of the punchline it's become, because it really felt like a way, and what I try to do in my comics too is like, it's a way to show the true me. In a
Right.
way, it's a way to show, like, here's purely how I think and how I view the world in my perspective. And it felt like, especially growing up, I mean, I was a, like, quote unquote, good girl. I was very shy, and I was very, you know, internal. And through my comics, I'm like, well, you know, you can't see me sometimes how I act to you, but here you could see what I'm really thinking and how I really, you know, can express myself. Here's how I really am. And then when I got to college, I did an internship at Nickelodeon, and that was really the first time when I one, just understanding I could do an internship at Nickelodeon was kind of like a revelation. And then also the second thing was like, oh my gosh, everything I love about like writing and drawing and acting, I can make into a job in this medium that I've always thought as a way to escape, but can actually be a way that I could live and thrive. And since then, I started working in production at DreamWorks TV. So I was on the Puss in Boots TV show, which I just got to see on the plane again. That was featured on the plane, and I was like, oh my God, here it is.
That's awesome.
Holds up. especially the production assistant work. Um, but, but since then, after that, I started working as a board-driven board artist because it always felt very natural to me. Of animation is a visual medium at its heart, and telling jokes and stories felt like a marriage between words and pictures. And I worked on the Trolls movie for a long time, Trolls World Tour, and that's how I got to know Kelly. And I was visiting visiting DreamWorks after going on to a different project, and I like to say that Kelly accosted me, and it's not far from the truth. But she said, I need you to work on this movie. I think it's really up your alley. And she was right, because it's like a movie about, like, not just a teenage girl, but a woman, like a girl trying to find her way in the setting we haven't seen, with these macro themes that felt so specific to her journey, but so universal to everyone. And also an original, honestly. Like, it's when I've been in the industry, it's been hard to find projects to work on that are not IP or franchise based or spin-offs. And there was something so exciting of, oh, we can create a character in a world that people could hold on to and want to see more of. Like, we could start this. It was a really exciting opportunity.
No, that's amazing, and I think what hearing that DreamWorks has that as an initiative, or Margie has that as an initiative, where it's, fresh storytelling, as well as keeping the IP going of these beloved franchise, but having the courage and the trust in the creatives, that there's great new ideas out there, and there's great new, she's very, or DreamWorks as a company, very open to having these new projects and these new characters. I love that when Seth and Courtney were telling us about that. It's so great to know that they're going to keep coming.
What when you're, looking back, it's like, obviously we want to talk about the project, but also just with both of your paths, one of the things that, like, we talk about consistently is just mentorship, and what your experience has been. And I know DreamWorks, just watching it, you guys have had such powerhouse women, at the helm. How has mentorship really affected you? What does that kind of look like? Because I think animation is, obviously, as we said at the top of the podcast, is, with DE&I, it is still a little bit behind, and it's catching up. And how, like, what have your experiences been?
Yeah, I think I've been really lucky that I've had a lot of incredible bosses. And, really starting from Aaron Warner, who was the producer of Shrek 2, all the way to Gina Shea, who was the producer of Trolls World Tour and the first Trolls. And I think Gina in particular continues really to be a mentor. She's probably the person I call the most when I'm, not sure what to do about something, or I'm having a moment where I'm like, am I the only one that thinks this is nuts? She's the person that I call to help talk me down. And I think the thing that I really appreciated about her and really the whole team that worked on the Trolls movies was that I felt like I could really be myself, and I didn't have to, like, pretend to be cool or pretend to know all the answers, and I could be really vulnerable with them, but also still feel supported in what my role was and what my voice was and what I had to contribute. And I think part of that had to do with just the environment that Gina is the producer, and then, Walt Dorn was our director, and he's directing the third movie now. He did this as well, that they just created a space where people could be themselves and felt like they had a voice that was worthy to contribute to the movie. And so I think that's something that I've taken with me, and working on this movie have really tried to emulate that and create a similar kind of space for people.
Yeah, and I think you have, Kelly. Yeah.
Yes.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Faryn.
But it's interesting you said, like, how, I think something that's been a learning process for me is I've been very lucky with a lot of mentors too, a lot of storyboard artists or people in the department who has seen something in me and supported me and all the way through. Brian Burns, Jim Mortensen. But I think what's been a discovery in this movie for me, because this is the first time I've been in a leadership role of any capacity, is finding how I can be a leader that is in my, with how I talk, with how I act. Because definitely, I think, going back to like women in entertainment, the way I lead is very different than like how, honestly, how a man would. I'm a very polite person, and I'm a little more soft spoken, and but I still have the same ideas and needs and responsibilities and ability that anyone else would, and it's just the way to express it. I think it's been a journey for me to figure out for myself, like, oh, the way I express it is right too. And I love, honestly, the fact that like Kelly has been in this big role, even though we do have different roles. It's always nice to have that kind of role model of no, a woman can be here too, especially in an industry where, creatively there are so many male voices, which are all great, but it's nice to see yourself in that constellation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think especially because the movie really is about 3 generations of women and them finding their own superpowers and finding their own path. It really was important to us to have women in creative leadership roles, from Faryn as our co-director, Michelle Mendenhall, our editor, Joanne, our head of lighting, our composer, Stephanie Ikonomu. Like, there's really, a really nice there's like authenticity and fingerprints across the movie that are true to who we are as women, right? And I think we were very protective. I know for myself, I was super protective of Agatha, the mother in the movie, because she had made a really big mistake in not being totally honest with her daughter, which as parents we sometimes do, right, to protect our kids. And it was really important to me that she never come off naggy, or, someone used the word overbearing the other day, and I was like, Agatha's not overbearing, she's just overprotective. And there's something empathetic about that. And so, I think one of the things I'm really most proud of about this movie is that it has, an authentic point of view that comes from the people creating the movie itself, not just people trying to put themselves in somebody else's shoes. Like, we've lived this experience. Mm-hmm. We are daughters, all of us. And so we can all connect with Ruby in that moment when she's just like, Mom, let me be myself,
That's awesome. I love that it's animated, that's real, or that has those real feelings. Are you guys feeling like your baby's about to be unleashed
Released,
intended, but on the world? I mean, is this something that you've been so protective, and it's been for how long? How long have you guys been working on it?
I mean, I've been on it for 3 years. Kelly, you're longer.
Yeah, I've been on it for about 3.5.
Oh my gosh! And now now the world gets to see your baby. How exciting is that?
It's surreal, especially because I started this during the pandemic. So like it became this project that kind of I worked on. It was maybe like, I say it was a movie, but who really knew? It's just something I kind of do on, during the day. And suddenly like we have these posters everywhere, and we have a lot of fan art, which I love because I used to draw fan art of things I was excited about and connected to as well. For me, it's been surreal. I think only next week will it really kind of hit me of like, oh yeah, people know this character and all these things that we put our hearts and tears, a lot of tears and sweat into to make happen. It's exciting.
It's so exciting.
It's exciting. In terms of just, as you embarked on this process, what is your creative process like?
Oh, yeah.
How do you approach, it's like, that's a 3.5 and a 3-year journey is a long journey in terms of how do you stay engaged? How do you stay in it, right? Because it can be very trying when you're in, it's not a film where you're like, I'm out like live, where it's like a live action, where it's like, here's 2 or 3 months, right? That's 3.5 years of your life. Like, that's a lot.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time in each other's office, like just staring at each other, like, what are we doing? Oh, yeah. How are we doing this? No, I think, even though it's a 3-year process, there's lots of ups and downs throughout that, and because of the way it's so iterative, that like weirdly enough, every day is kind of the same, but it's also very different, and each phase of the process is different. And I think what's exciting is that right when you're starting to like really get tired of it, a new department comes online and they start contributing and adding their perspective and their, expertise to it. So, like you'll be sitting there looking at a shot in animation dailies that you've been like, Faryn may have storyboarded like 10 different versions of it, and now an animator's animating it, and suddenly it comes to life in this incredible way that it then kind of inspires you to just keep on going, because you know that right when you're starting to get really tired and like lose steam, there's this like cavalry coming in who are coming in like fresh-eyed, ready to go, and excited to try to like take up that mantle and make it even better than it was before. So I think that's really helpful. But yeah, it's a lot of sweat and tears and wringing your hands and wondering if what you're doing is right
Oh yeah,
or not.
we used to say that there like 1 hour in the real world time was actually 2 weeks in Gillman time, just because like we would start the day and a scene would take place like let's say at like a skate park. And at the end of the day, we're like, the skate park's been gone for hours. Like, how are you not, like, we're way past that. Now we're in the ocean. Now there's 3 new characters. It's hard to talk about the creative process on this, because really, day to day, moment to moment, we had to adjust to, okay, what's the new situation here? But always, I think, the collaborative process was what got us through it. I mean, animation is, or actually, I think that's been one of the biggest learning lessons for me, going from a singular department story to going into being the co-director, is just this idea of, I kind of expand my view of what it takes to work on a single moment. Because before it was just me and it was one-to-one, like my brain to the pencil to the ideas. And I think the kind of beauty of animation is really every single shot, the ownership belongs to like 10 people. Every single moment has had 40 to 400 different brains thinking about how to make it the best it could be. And it gets you through kind of knowing that you're surrounded by people who are so smart and brilliant in ways you can't even fathom. It's been the beauty of recognizing how big this movie is and how many people work on it. For me, is just that we all have a piece, and you're never alone in it.
It's so incredible, because I just think back and going to like what I referenced before. I remember when with How to Train Your Dragon, of like bringing an ornithologist, which is where I really learned what an ornithologist is, to be honest. It's not really in my day-to-day vernacular, but in terms of like making sure feathers were perfect and how they moved, and the thoughtfulness and the care that goes into animation. It's not just it's the artistry, right, and that talent that goes into it, and how all of these different things move together. And I remember that day, because we were working on some PR pieces for it, but of just seeing the teams just kind of like draft and sketch what the feathers were doing, and in the wind, and and it's just, there's so much careful thought that goes into animation that I don't think animation necessarily, like, people understand the level of depth and the breadth and depth of what it takes to create some of these incredible scenes and moments, and how do you bring them in, right, and into certain moments, whether it's to create that emotional connection, to feel like you're actually in the film, and it's incredible to watch and really understand. And I think the appreciation goes up as you understand the care and thought that goes into it.
Yeah, that's right. Nothing is an accident in animation. Everything has been like carefully thought about, talked about, questioned, analyzed, and considered before it ends up in the final movie.
With DreamWorks, with the animation world that DreamWorks has created, do you enjoy working? I know, Faryn, you've done television, and Kelly, I don't know if you've done, but versus a feature film, is it a different process, or is it similar with doing a television series versus a feature?
I think I think they're very similar in a lot of ways, because in the end you are just telling a story about these characters. And I think if you boil it down, there are a lot of similarities to how it also goes through the pipeline. I think the two biggest differences are time and budget, because I think, with TV you have, like for me, I had 6 weeks to work on an episode, and in that time you get the first draft out there, and then you just kind of have to polish it and move on. And that's a blessing and a curse. There are some moments where you say, oh, I really wish I could have thought about this harder or delved deeper, but now it's gone. But then also, if something wasn't working out or something was great, no matter what, it's time for the next one. It's time to reset and go. And I think the beauty with, and budget too, TVs just don't have as much budget. And that is really something you could always work with, and limitations give you actually a lot of ways to find out how to make shortcuts and be strategic. But then when you're on an animated movie, on the budget side, it's kind of freeing. We still have a limit, and we still think very strategically, but the kinds of moments that we create, and because of the time and how much we're thinking about it, how deep we could delve and how much we could really curate them, it's just, the capacity is a little greater. It's only one moment though, and you work it and work it and work it and work it until it drives you nuts. But it's going to be worth it in the end. So I think that's a difference, and I love both, honestly. But feature does have something special to it.
When you're, looking at this film in particular, were there challenges that you faced, whether it's a particular scene or getting it just right where you both, like, and it can be one together or separate, but, looking at it and saying, like, yeah, we got that right. Or, hey, this scene it took, a ton of time because we just couldn't quite get it right. Like, what did that look like for you in this project?
Kelly, do you have one scene that comes to mind?
It was the whole movie. The whole movie was hard. No, it's funny because my answer is going to sound contradictory to what Faryn just said, because I would say the schedule and the budget. That was what was hardest, right? Because, to create a movie that belongs in a theater that's going to attract a wide audience, we had to really come up with something special. And, as Faryn pointed out, like, this is an original movie. So we're starting really from an idea on a piece of paper. We have no idea, if there's an audience there for it. So there was a certain, leap of faith that we had to take. But we were trying to deliver something that would have a cinematic, epic scale. And I think the place you see it the most is in our third act battle. And that was one of the last things that we figured out. And we had gone through many different versions of the third act, and some of them you're kind of like, I can't believe you even considered doing that. And then, when the art department, with sort of in concert with the effects department, came up with this idea of having this Titan mermaid with water hair, I mean, it was spectacular looking. But the first thing I said to our VFX supervisor, Dave Walvert, I was like, can we really do that with the time and the money that we have left? And he was like, it's going to be really tight, but I think we can. And we had to be, to Faryn's point, we had to be really strategic about it and limit, how many shots she's in and how we were shooting it, where the water line was. And so it was really one of those scenes where all of the different departments had to come together, starting even just from the storyboards. We had thumbnail drawings of what the scene could be, and we put them up on a wall, and we went through and with post-it notes, like, put, like, nope, can't afford that shot, can't afford that shot, pull those shots out. Or, with another color post-it note, we would be like, this is a moment we need to see. This isn't, there's a moment where Ruby rises up out of the water, and that was like a very defining moment we were working towards. And it was like, no matter what, that moment has to be in there. And so, that was through story, and then layout took that, and then they sort of followed that guide, and then of course expanded it, and then we'd contract. It's like this constant expanding and
found
contracting.
Solutions. I mean,
and then between
and found solutions in some cases where we're like, we need to show this, but we can't afford this. Well, maybe we could place the camera a little lower, and that way we only see it in the foreground coming up. Or here's how we could hide it to make sure that story wise we're getting the moment, and we're not, and we can actually, we are able to do it. So.
And then just, from a rendering perspective, water is really hard. And so, our lighting team really, between lighting and effects, they really had to work together to figure out how to just even just to render it so that you could get shots back. And so it was one of those things that really, like, Faryn and Kirk, our director, and myself, like, we only really finally saw it in its full final form when we were like mixing at Skywalker. So we really were just sort of taking a leap of faith and knowing that we were in really good hands because we had, Pierre-Olivier Vincent, our production designer, and Dave Walvert, our VFX supervisor, who had come from How to Train Your Dragon. So they knew how to do big, incredible effects and world building. And then, we had Joanna, our head of lighting, and Lawrence Lee, our head of effects. Like, we had the best people for the job to do it. And so in the end, it ended up being like, oh, well, that was easy, right? Even though it wasn't. Like, going through it, I think every day was really hard for everybody. But once it all came together, like, it was sort of this like smooth landing at the end of the movie. Like, we didn't go over schedule, we didn't go over budget, we worked overtime, but like not crazy amounts. And so, it was just really exciting to see it all come together, especially like at the end when everyone's just like doing their last push to get the movie done.
Do you guys take a break now? What do you do when it are you
Yes.
going on are you going under the covers for months, or what happens now with you guys?
That is exactly what I'm going to be doing. I will be under my covers, hiding from the internet, hiding from computer screens. No, yeah, I definitely
Yeah.
want to take some time off and really just spend some time like with my husband and my kids because, to Farron's point, we started this movie and like the pandemic hit. And so, we really, like, they've been here while we've been making it and have watched it evolve, but now really for my family, they just want their mom back and want to be able to like go hang out, So it'll be nice to be able to do
Yeah, I
that
don't.
for a
I,
bit.
it's gonna be nice for me to find something else to talk about. Just one more topic, something new. Wow, it's gonna be a great month.
I saw a funny article that it was very positive about the movie, but it was like Krakens have had a bad rap for so long. Like, everyone, thinks this and this, and it's fine. It's so great that now finally that somebody's positive. It was so funny. It was like the Kraken advocacy group
Oh, good.
was writing the article. It was very cute that they were ready for Krakens to have their time.
Hysterical.
I
I
love
love how we
that.
did
They've been
Krakens because
maligned
it
for
feels
too
so
long.
in the DreamWorks tradition of taking kind of these monsters and making them into heroes and kind
Right.
of not even subverting but putting a new lens on these creatures, like I think with ogres and trolls and dragons. It's really nice to feel like we've added to that with the Kraken of all things,
Yeah.
and made her a teenage
Yeah.
girl. It's a nice little pairing.
Well, that's the thing is like I love that, that was actually one of the other things that was really hard was coming up with her design, both like as a teenager but as a Kraken as well, because, historically, if you were to just Google Kraken, they're really pretty gross and scary and ugly looking. And we didn't want that to be Ruby's problem, that she was wrestling with how she looked. We wanted it to be about an internal struggle, that she doesn't know she can handle this power. And then combining that with wanting to create a character that is aspirational, that young kids would be like, I want to be that. It was really tricky, and there's some versions of her in our visual development that are much more monstrous looking, but we always kept coming back to like her as a teenager and how can we have a design that reflects her as a teenager but on this grander scale, and playing with that contrast between being this giant powerful character who just wants to hide behind a lighthouse because she's like worried her mom's going to be mad that she broke her rule. Like there's something really fun and playful
Yeah.
about that.
Question in term I this is one of my questions that I've had always with animation, because obviously, like, in terms of directing voice,
Yeah.
like, I'd love to just kind of like, when you're with your actors and they're doing the voices, what is the process for directing that?
Yeah, I mean that's something I'm still. I can't say I'm an expert in.
Yeah.
Luckily, Kirk, the director of the movie, really is someone who has taught me so much about working with voice actors. Just in the sense of like, I think as with anyone else on the crew, you want to give them ownership too. You want them to feel
Yeah.
like they are making like they're giving a part to this character. They're playing a character. It's still acting. We still need them to feel these parts and feel these emotions, and because it shows on screen if they don't. Um, so I think, yeah, it's just allowing ownership, and then also you start to kind of collaborate and write whether you know it or not to the actors. Like Ruby was a character who started in this place where she was kind of insecure and small, but actually a lot of the quirks we gave her and a lot of how we started to write to her was because of how Lana Condor, our main actress, our lead actress, would act and how she would talk to us. And we said, Lana's really good at kind of this, kind of falling over herself with her words. And maybe we could like
Yeah.
kind of put that into the script and give her more moments where she can really get flustered, but in this very charming way that she has, and really play to her sweetness. And then we would do that, and Lana would say, "Oh, maybe I could do it like this." And we'd be like, "That's even better." And it felt like we would just
Yeah.
giving them the ability to have a part in this movie, really, not just be there
Yeah.
as a hired voice. Like that they are the character. They're the one jersey on the poster. I think that's really the way to do it.
It's like DreamWorks has always been known for having incredible talent behind the
Yeah.
voices, right? And that's something that's always been
Yeah.
that's a staple. So but directing it in terms of getting those inflection points and so forth, and how, when we talk to directors for live action, it's very much, what's ad hoc, what's playful, what's not, So, but with animation, because you're literally, there's not, like riffing, right? It's like you're literally, the script is the script, right? There's not a lot of ad hoc or, improv to the situation.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the recording sessions, though, we do allow quite a bit of room for
Okay.
improv. That's the beauty of it, is that we record them before it starts animation. And so in the
Oh,
room, if an actor, I mean, that's why oftentimes we cast that's why Eddie Murphy is so
right.
incredible, or why Jack Black is so incredible, is because and Sam Richardson in our movie is another great example of someone who, would have a line of dialogue, and then in making it their own, they would start to play with it and riff on it. And if they come up with something funny in the room, we'll go with
Okay,
it,
so
I love how you and I
And
are just
so-
like a light bulb
I
just
know,
went
we're
off
like,
for us.
really?
I know. Well, and the other interesting thing I'll say, just practically speaking, is that they're not acting with other actors necessarily. They don't have their scene partner
Okay.
the way you would in live action. They're reading with the directors, and so Kirk and Faryn would be in the room with Lana, for example, and they would be reading. And I think Faryn, having come from storyboard, being a storyboard artist, part of what you need to do as a storyboard artist is you need to pitch your scenes. And so you'll be, showing the drawings that you've done for the scene, but then you'll also be acting it out. And so Farron's actually a very good actor. And so for her to read with those actors really helped to place them in the scene, because they had someone that they could riff off in a way that, like, directors in live action, they don't have to do that. They don't need to act because
Yeah.
they've got other actors there. But our directors really do have to act and be that scene partner and sort of play with, like, what is it that, Lana or Cooney-Cilella is giving me in this moment. So, like, Faryn was a scene partner with Jane Fonda, and she held her own.
That's the greatest compliment.
pretty good.
That's amazing.
But also talking about how you could play in the room a little bit. This wasn't really a play, but at one point I was reading with Jane Fonda, and I said, "Well, Grandma," which was not right in the script, and Jane corrected me in as her character of "It's Grandmama." It goes up on the second ma, and we put it in the movie because we watch that and we go, "That's the character," and then the animators see that too, and the animation comes, as Kelly said, after the voices, and we have cameras on all these recording sessions so the animators could watch and take some of their characteristics, some of their behavior, and put it into the characters, and they say, "I love how Jane does this kind of lift with her arm. Let's put that into the character." Or that a little bit of pride that she shows, a little smile and humor. Let's put that into the character too. So they're the second half of it.
Oh, that's amazing. I had no idea that's how it happened. When do you, like, when in the process do you start thinking about the voices? Like how in the 3.5, 4 year, when do the voices start coming in and you
Yeah.
start, switching to them specifically?
Pretty early on, because to Farron's point, they really do help inform the characters. So Lana, she was probably cast at least 3 years ago, and we've done maybe 20 recording
Okay.
sessions with her over the whole length of the film, and so she's really seen it evolve. And then there's other characters that maybe came in later in the film just because they were more minor characters and we could get them in later, and we could kind of get by with having what we call scratch
Hmm.
actors. But the sooner that you can get them in, the better, because it really does help inform the characters and helps us when we're rewriting to sort of play off of what their strengths are and what characteristics they're bringing to those characters as well.
In terms of like looking back on your history of films and obviously your experience in television, what was the day that you both just like were so intimidated or scared? Like, what was that moment and how did you push through it?
Oh man,
I have
every
to
single
ask because
moment.
our audience is a lot of creatives who are trying to make their mark, and there's a lot of intimidation factors happening. So I
Farron and I are like, how do we narrow it down to one day?
or like, what was that first day on set like that you're nervous that you're or you're giving direction or what is that 1 or 2 days that really penetrated or continue
Sticks
to
with you.
stick with you?
I mean, I do really want to say, rather than 1 or 2 days, it's been almost every day of this project for me. Because, but like, because there have been really going from story department where really I walked out of a lot of my experiences going, it's all about story. Story is number one. Like the storyboard artists are number one. We make the movie, and the dawning realization of how many different departments there are, that a lot of them invisible, a lot of them you really like. I wouldn't even have guessed, knowing animation pretty well, and how much work goes into each and every moment. As a co-director, there were moments where I walked out of a meeting and I went, I need to learn more about this department before the next time I go back in there. But something that's helped me is knowing, I've heard a definition of confidence is the knowledge that you can handle a situation and that you've done it before. So like I went to animation meetings and those were the first time I've ever been in a room with animators while I've been working in animation, and it was thrilling. But I was very terrified of like how can I respectfully give a note that is helpful to them and helpful to their craft. That was always my goal, helpful. And I stuck with story roots, and I stuck with character. And over time, the more and more animation dailies we went through, the more and more times we saw this animation come back and I interacted with it, the more I kind of gained confidence. And that would happen every single time on every new department that I would go in and go, I don't know anything about this. Why are they listening to me? Oh my God. And like, how am I going to do this? And then by the end of this movie, I go, oh, I mean, I've learned so much just by putting in the mileage in these shows, and my confidence has grown so much that it's hard to say the moment when I felt the most scared, because it was really almost every moment, and also the moment when I felt the most proud, which was a lot of moments as well.
You push through. That's amazing.
Kelly,
I was gonna say, Kelly,
Great answer, Farron.
go deep.
It's sort of similar to Farron. This was the first time that I was really the producer on a movie. Up until now, I've always been like a co-producer or an associate producer. There was always somebody above me who was really in charge. And it was pretty early on, I think, for me, where we were in a room and we had to decide I don't even remember what we were trying to decide we needed to do, but we talked about it and everyone gave their opinion. And then suddenly everyone kind of turned to me and was like, so what are we going to do? And I was like, I guess I'm the one that has to decide what we're going to do. So this is what we're going to do. And really being able to trust that I had listened to everybody and that I have had enough experience and I've been in the room participating in those conversations enough time that I really was prepared to make the decision and that, you know, it's never my decision alone either, because everyone else has weighed in on it. There's Margie and Kristen, the studio leadership above us, that they were also weighing in on major decisions. And so, you know, that's the great thing about animation, is you're never alone. It's never solely on your shoulders. And so there's something really comforting about that.
I love that. Those are great answers. Well, we are sadly out of time. This has been the fastest hour.
Oh my
We
gosh.
we want everyone going this week to see Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken. We're so excited that you guys took time out. We know how crazy busy your media schedule is, your travel schedule. You have been amazing and generous to speak to our audience, and we are so excited to see your film.
And it was so great to connect with you guys.
Well, thank
Oh
you.
my god, this was great.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
It was
thank
a
you
total
so much.
pleasure.
Thanks, you guys. We
So
hope to see you
excited for you
soon.
guys.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and leave a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. To stay up to date with In Her Words, join the conversation by following Women in Entertainment on our social channels and subscribe to our weekly newsletter at womeninentertainment.com.